Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Rising Tide Leadership Podcast, Identity and Influence. Today, we're talking about responsibility, and to do that, we're talking with Dr. Lemuel Seaton.
Yes, sir, Dr. Bo. Always great to be with you. Looking forward to this conversation.
Before I get to my questions, why don't you tell us what inspired you to write this specific leadership lesson?
Yeah, I wrote this leadership lesson in my first role as an executive of an organization, and I quickly realized that you get to do a lot of stuff as the leader. There's a lot of benefits for being a leader, but you also have to fix all the problems and take care of all the things that go wrong as the leader. You can't pick and choose. You're responsible for both. So yeah, it was a good lesson.
So, when you hear the phrase the leader's responsibility, what comes to mind first?
Yeah, what comes to mind first is that I am in charge. And because I'm in charge, the first thing I think about are, again, all the good things about leadership, the benefits, all of the perks. But the focus of this lesson has to do with the fact that you might get a lot of perks and there might be a lot of benefits, but you also are responsible for all of the things that happen in the organization. So anything in your area that goes wrong, you're also responsible for it, which is a quick lesson. I learned that lesson quickly in that role.
Why do you think so many leaders default to blame instead of taking ownership when things go sideways?
Man, I think that's the reason why I wrote this lesson. I had worked for a leader, and the leader, when something would go wrong in the organization, like they quickly would blame the people in the organization. It was so easy to blame somebody else. Like they didn't get it, or they didn't do this. Like whenever that leader would say that, my thought was like, but you're the leader. You're responsible for all of this. And so that's your responsibility. And so, yeah, quickly learned that lesson that, it's easy to blame everybody else, but it just shows that you weren't ready, or it just shows that you're insecure, that you can't take responsibility.
How can leaders identify the early warning signs that they fail to step in soon enough?
The bigger the organization, the harder it is to see the warning signs. And then sometimes, like if it's such a big organization, it's so easy to miss things because there's so many things that are happening. I think when we get too focused on certain things, you let other things go. So you can miss the warning signs there. And I think the communication with the team is key. So if you have great communication with your team, they can tell you what's happening. And if you're checking in with your team, you can find out what's happening in that area to kind of be in front of these things. Yeah, if you can have good communication with your team, you can hear what's happening. But man, like I guess this is a lesson that I'm still learning. Like I don't know if there's like one thing that I can pinpoint to early warning signs, but I can tell you if you're missing things with your team, if you're not having the conversations with the people you're around and you're too focused on one thing, then you can miss it.
What happens to team morale when leaders don't take responsibility for the systemic issues?
Man, when you don't take responsibility for things as the leader, you model for your team that same exact behavior. So if the team leader doesn't do it, then why do I have to do it? They won't take responsibility for things because you didn't take responsibility as the leader.
So, have you seen leaders who let problems fester and then overreact when it finally explodes? What usually drives that kind of behavior?
Man, I have fallen into that trap multiple times. I've let things happen, and then I've definitely overreacted and let my emotions get the better of me. And when you let the emotions get the better of you, then you're not leading. When you're reacting, you're not leading. I keep saying you just don't react. So when you're reacting, you're actually managing a thing. You're not leading. But yeah, it's happened to me a ton.
So, let's talk about yelling. Why do leaders sometimes use their anger or raised voices as a management tool? And what are the long term effects of that?
Yeah, I think yelling, if it's an emotional thing, then you're managing the thing. You're not leading, right? I don't think it's helpful, and I think the long-term effects is that people won't want to work for you at the end of the day. Like if you're a guy that just yells in the office, I mean, nobody wants to get yelled at, man. And if you're getting yelled at, if you're doing yelling, then you're not leading. You're managing. If you're yelling at somebody, like, and if you can't be calm, then I think it's managing an emotion. It's managing, and it's not leading.
So, what would you say then to a leader who believes that yelling shows strength or gets results?
What do I say? I say nothing. because I'm not around that kind of leader. You know what I mean? That's not the kind of vibe that I'm about. That's not what I would hire. You know what I mean? I have hired yellers, but he quit. You know what I mean? Because that's just not the vibe. You know what I mean? So I guess when you ask what do I say nothing because I'm trying not to have those kinds of people around me. But if they believe that yelling shows strength and gets results, if that happened to me, then I miss on the hiring side of things. I miss on the front end.
Can you explain the difference between setting high standards and managing with fear?
Yeah, I like this one. Setting high standards, I think, is about leadership, and then managing fear is about management. So when you're using fear, you're trying to manage a thing, right? I don't think that fear is a leadership quality. And before I answered that, I actually I looked it up. Is fear a leadership quality? Fear is not a leadership quality, but fear is management. That's what it is. And so if you want our take on leadership and management, you should listen to our previous recording on leadership and management. But yeah, if you're using fear and if you're yelling, then you're managing fear.
You talk a lot about leadership not being reactive. In fact, you said it
Mhm.
just a few minutes ago, and you probably said at least once a leadership lesson. And it's so true. If you're reacting, you're not leading.
Yeah.
So, how can a leader shift from reactive leadership to proactive guidance?
So, I think the caveat is sometimes you just have to react, right? I truly believe leaders don't react, but sometimes situations happen and you have to react to a thing. And then you either have to manage the emotions or you have to manage that situation. So I totally understand that. So sometimes as a leader, you have to react to something and manage that situation. But reacting is not leadership, it's managing. And proactive guidance is being the ability to see ahead, the ability to be futuristic. Being proactive means you have a good plan on the front end and a clear and compelling vision in front of you. And so when your plan gets you to your vision, then you can be proactive about things and then you're not necessarily reacting to things. But we work with people and, you have people on your team and sometimes things happen, things outside of your control. And then when those things happen, you have to react and then you manage that situation. I guess in that situation, you can lead the team to manage that situation. But yeah, leaders still don't react.
I'd like to shift and talk a little bit about culture.
Yeah.
How does a leader's responsibility shape the culture of a team or an organization?
Man, when the leader can take responsibility for everything that happens in the organization, when something bad happens, they, I think, can create that safety for everybody. I think a leader creating a leadership culture creates safety for your employees and for your team members to innovate, to try and to risk without fear of losing their job. I mean, obviously, if they do something, against the law or if they do something against the rules, then there are consequences for that. That's normal. But to create that leadership culture where people can try things and innovate, I think that innovation happens within the safety of leadership culture.
What does it look like to create a culture of accountability without creating a culture of blame?
So I've seen cultures where the leaders want accountability for the team, but they don't want accountability for themselves. And it just doesn't work that way. I think what it looks like to create a culture of accountability is to also accept accountability yourself as the leader. Yeah, and I've just seen too many organizations for that to happen. And when you take responsibility and accountability, then it creates a culture of accountability for everyone. What the leader does is what everybody else is going to do. So if the leader blames and doesn't take any responsibility for things, that's what the team members are going to do. And so if the leaders can take accountability and responsibility for everything, then everyone will also do the same. Everyone will feel safe.
What are some of the practical things that a leader can do to course correct when they've been avoiding tough conversations?
Man, the thing that stands out to me is to have the appropriate conversations that need to take place. So if it was a public thing, if it was a public offense, have a public meeting. If it happened in private, then have a private meeting. I've fallen into the trap of making fun, well, because I responded and I reacted and I didn't feel like I was just trying to manage a thing, and then I responded in the same way that it happened. And so then I had to, publicly apologize for that. And then I also, in that case, privately apologize. But like if a public thing happened, make it public. But if it was a private thing, relating private, I think that's the thing. Have the appropriate conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate you being vulnerable and letting our leaders know that it doesn't matter where you are in the leadership journey, you're going to mess it up and have to have those conversations. Can you share a real life story, maybe from your leadership experience, where you had to take responsibility for someone else's failure?
Yeah, the first thing that came to mind was I was let go from my role because one of my direct reports failed in their responsibilities and their duties. And I have to live with the consequences of their failure. And you hear me say that, like they failed, but in them failing, I failed them, right? I can make excuses, but ultimately their failure was my failure. And I didn't do enough ahead of time to help them, and I totally missed the warning signs like you were talking about earlier. I thought I had the backing, and I thought I had enough support, and when push came to shove, like, I was shoved. In this real life situation, one of my direct reports failed to hit his marks, and so then that's my responsibility.
How do we coach leaders to reflect instead of react when they're disappointed in their team?
Yeah. There's that saying, how you do anything is how you do everything, right?
Ha,
So
it's good.
learning how to do it in every area of your life is what you need to do. You don't like do things differently as a leader and then you do everything else completely differently. How you do things in all of your life is how you're going to do things in leadership. You lead out of who you are. So when you're reflecting on your leadership actions and things that you've done, um it I mean, it starts with just everyday little things. If you're reacting constantly to everyday little things, that's how you're going to lead. If you're able to just take a moment um, and reflect. I was just listening to a talk and they were asking this expert, like, when you're in a situation and you're having a tough conversation, what do you do? And and I like what he said. He goes, the first word that you say is a breath. The first thing that you want to hear is an inhale and exhale, because what you do is you calm down your nervous system, right? And then you can hear yourself and you're not like just jumping. Like, that's what I do. We're having a conversation, like, I want to just jump in and react. But if I can learn how to just take a little breath and just, listen to my breath, inhale, exhale, and then respond, calm my nervous system down enough to not react. Later on in the talk, he was talking about how, like, if someone's like coming at you really hard, if you just are quiet for 8 to 10 seconds, right? That narcissist that's like coming at you really hard, they're gonna keep hearing that for 8 to 10 seconds, and it's gonna be awkward for them
Yeah.
because, like, you're not saying anything. What they want is they want you to fight and come back at them. But if you can calm yourself down and listen 8 to 10 seconds, what happens is they hear what they said, and then they're feeling really stupid for saying that because you didn't react to it. That's a tough lesson to learn. Taking a breath, taking a moment, just taking some time to calm yourself down so that you're not reacting out of emotion.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of this has to do with trust. So, in what ways does lack of responsibility from leadership hurt trust within a team?
Yeah, that lack of trust creates an environment where you're not safe, right? Where things aren't clear. So then, like, it becomes emotional and it becomes chaotic. It's not driven by vision, it's driven by emotions. And so, like, everyone's walking on eggshells because they don't know how the leader's doing or how the leader's feeling. I remember going to meetings and working for a guy. And before I went into the office, I'd ask his administrative assistant, how's he doing today? You know what I mean? Because that tells me how these meetings are going to go or how hard I could push, if he's not doing well or whether he's doing well. So yeah, man, that lack of responsibility will hurt the team, and it just creates an environment where you don't feel safe and it'll be emotional and chaotic and you just don't know.
So, what happens when leaders do take responsibility then? How does that impact the team's dynamics?
Man, when a leader is secure enough to take responsibility, it creates a safe environment. People will want to follow it because people will be in relationship with this leader. People can be led in that situation. Go back to our episode on power, and referent power can be used to lead that organization. Innovation can happen people can try things. It's a safe place to work, because the leader has.
So, for somebody listening today who might be facing frustration with their team, what's the first question they should be asking themselves before entering into conversations, blaming people, etc.?
Yeah, when I thought through this question, the first thing that came to mind is, do you have the right seat on the bus? Are you in the right place to begin with? Are you leading or are you managing? It starts with you and how you're showing up to your work and to your leadership. Because like, if you're not in the right seat, if you're not even on the right bus, like if it's just not a good fit for you, then all the other things don't matter. But if you're on the right bus and you're in the right seat, then you can ask yourself, am I leading or am I managing? And if I'm not leading, why am I managing? What is it that I'm managing? How do I get back to leading? I think having a clear vision and values really help you to come back to that. Oh, that's another thing we keep talking about in every episode. Come back to your vision, come back to your values. Are you doing those things? And then if you're not, then you got other things to answer. But like
Yeah,
that's
you
a good
do.
place to start.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Lim, I appreciate it, man. This is another good leadership lesson. So, leaders, if you are not taking responsibility, it's time for you to take the heat. It's time for you to drive the culture. So, until next time, don't forget to like, subscribe, share. Go over to RTCLC, sign up for our newsletter. It's free. Give you all the good stuff. Appreciate your time.